So we are in part 2 of what I named this series, What If Your Money Could Do the Talking? What if your money could do the talking? And we're asking the question, what would your money say if your money could talk? And we spoke about it last week, and we discovered that what our money would say actually matches what Jesus did say when he spoke about money. And we realize that if we look at scriptures, Jesus actually talks more about money than anything else. Not because he's needing money, not because he's wanting money, but because of what money is able to do to us if we don't watch out. Now, if you remember in session 1, I asked you, what would you do, or what do you do with your spare money, or your extra money? And then I went about proving to you that you actually have spare money, or at least you had it. Anyway, because of all our money is accounted for, we think that we don't have any spare money. We either spend it, or we are about to spend it, and we are paying off what we spend it on for over a period of time. Some of us are going through that. Or maybe we are saving it for a vacation, or for a rainy day, or a retirement. And I use a word to describe this destructive cycle of having that in us. And the word, well, you remember the word, it was greed. And greed, as we discovered, is an assumption that everything that comes our way is for our consumption. And we said one of the first things that our money would say to us, if our money could talk, would be about the assumption of consumption. That every single rand that comes my way, it's meant for me. Every rand that comes your way, it's meant for you. It's meant to spend now, or it is meant to save later. So you can spend it later, but either way, it's for you, or it's for me. And we spoke about it, and we saw what Jesus had to say about it. If you missed it, it is on the YouTube channel. You can go there and have a look. Now, of course, Jesus disagrees with this whole idea. In fact, he told us, and he didn't just mix his word, that life does not consist in abundance of possession. Remember I said to you, you don't see a hearse pulling a trailer behind with all your possessions, do you? In other words, life is not about stuff. Life is not about what you have. Life is not a race for newer, nicer, upgraded, renovated. Life is so much more than that. And you know that, and I know that. And your money, Jesus said, is just a tool. In fact, if your money could talk, it could remind us and say to us that I can add meaning to your life, but I'm not the meaning of your life. Now today, we're going to discuss the second thing our money might tell us if our money could actually talk. And if our money could actually talk, it might tell us this. The moment you think you owe me, I actually owe you. The moment you think you owe me, I actually own you. Now, to illustrate this, I want us to look at the way typical South Africans handle the finance, and it's going to be a little disturbing, okay? I want you to look at two graphs. So I'm going to ask Tammy to put a graph on the screen for us. Graph 1. To slide 1. No. Slide one. Double click it. There we go. Okay. So if you can see well, this is a typical, basically, hopefully, what should be a typical South African way of spending. The one is the y-axis, and the other is the x-axis. You can't speak about money without showing graphs. And it's not really ideal when it starts from zero earning or going all the way up to 300,000 a year. Okay? And on the other axis is basically the years that you've been on earth working. Okay? And basically the blue is your earning and the pink is your spending. How many of us, our graphs look like that? Not many. Can you put the next graph up? Okay. This is more like it, isn't it? I mean, we tend to spend more than we earn. So the pink is bigger or larger than the blue. Now, hopefully, in your lifetime, your income will look something like this on the rise. Okay? And for many of us, our spending will look something, well, it looks something like this. I hope. Lower than the income. Okay, not like that one, but the first slide. The truth is, most of us allow our income to actually match or drive our spending. In other words, if you make, and these are just figures that are sucked literally out of my thumb, if you make 45,000 a year, you're going to spend 45,000 a year. If you make 55, you're going to spend 55. If you make 100 a year, 100,000 a year, you're going to spend 100,000 a year, and so on and so on. Now, I say probably, not because you are doing that, but our current habit, if you look at most of South Africans, our current habit would follow right where your pay scale is. As a matter of fact, in the last year and a half, they've said because of COVID, things have completely changed. Because of the lack of money. People have been retrenched. People have to go to half jobs rather than full jobs and so on. And that's not the only thing that will follow you. Financial pressure would follow you as well, which will come to some of you as a shock. If I made that much money, how could I possibly have any financial pressure? Well, you'll be surprised. People who make that much and more money have spent it all. Or they don't necessarily have that money in their hand. You know, there's car payments, there's mortgage to pay, there's sometimes even second mortgage, and they feel that extraordinary financial pressure. I read an article the other day that was talking about it, that there's been a rise in suicides of businessmen and women in this country because of the financial pressure. For some of you, this might be your story. You're making more money than you've ever made, maybe, and you feel as much financial pressure or more and as you ever felt before. In fact, as I said, some people are saying it's worse than ever before. The more money people make, if the spending follows the income, the more pressure they actually feel. Now, for some of us, those graphs actually look like maybe a different way. And that's great. Maybe you have you're financial savvy. Maybe you've got it. Our spending maybe actually exceeds our income. In fact, sometimes it's because our income drops. As I mentioned in the last year or so, many people are working just as hard, but the income has dropped. But it doesn't mean life gets any easier. You go month to month to shop, and you see things that you used to buy for 500 Rand, if there's anything that you can buy for 500 Rand, that doesn't fill the bag anymore, isn't it? There's retrenchment, people have been fired, people have been put on half-day work, or you maybe decided to leave your job and start a new career. And many people would attest to that over COVID, that they were forced to get out of the job, or they decided to leave the job and started something new. But often it's because we spend and borrow until the graphs do an upside down kind of effect. And the next thing you know, you don't just have a money problem, you have, all kinds of problems. You have a marriage problem, because every conversation that you have with your spouse is about money, or the lack of money, or the pressure of money. You're probably going to say to yourself, or hear this from your spouse, how could you? Or why didn't you? Or didn't we already? Or things like that. And there's going to be that extra pressure. Lots of people with lots of stuff have lots of financial pressure. You see, when your life is like this, you actually become a slave to money, isn't it? You have purchased or borrowed, or you got yourself into slavery to money, credit cards, different stores, accounts, student loan, or whatever. They actually become what controls you. Every month, they are the ones who control you. They become your master, don't they? Whether you like it or not, that's what happens. They don't want to be your master, but they aren't. That's not why they are there, but they are. Somehow, that's what controls your life. And to help you to get through this, Jesus tells us a different story. Jesus comes and tells us a different story. And Jesus addresses this, and according to Jesus, we don't actually earn our money. It's not ours. It's not actually yours. And think about this. I mean, why wouldn't we think that our money is ours? Because we've earned it, isn't it? You've made it. You put it into the hours into making the money. Your name is on a paycheck. It's deposited into your account. So of course we think we owe this stuff, to which our money and our stuff might reply, hey, but I'll still be here when you are gone. The debts, or whatever, is still going to be here. And this is how we know that we are not the owners. We leave it all behind. We don't own it. We just manage it. And we only manage it for a little while. Which begs the question of, who do we manage it for? And Jesus answers that question to us in a parable. Now you know the parable. It's a parable that you've heard before, and so try not to allow your mind to rush to the end of the story if you know it. But here's a parable Jesus taught that really lays a foundation for where we are going with this sermon this morning. It's from Matthew 25, verse 14 to 15. He says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey. He calls his servant and he trusts him with his wealth. Now in a parable, there is always a God figure. So someone in that story is God. And there is always an us figure. So someone in the story represents us. Someone in the parable represents the people, which are Jesus' audience, and somebody in the parable represents God, the Father. And if you read this parable, if you read the whole parable in the context that it was meant, it becomes very clear that the wealthy man, the one who is going on a journey and he trusts his wealth to his servants, he is what? He's God. He's representing God. And the servants whom the wealth is entrusted to, well, that's me, that's you, that's us, isn't it? And so he continues and he says again, it will be like a man who goes on a journey, he calls his servant to him, and he entrusts his wealth to them. Now I want you to notice, he doesn't give them his wealth. This wasn't a loan. He just lets them manage his money for him for a little while he's gone. We're not told how long he's gone. We're just told that he's gone. And what percentage of the money did the servant owe? Well, 0. Nothing. What percentage did the master owe? All of it. 100% of it, isn't it? It was all his. And this is important. In fact, this is actually the point of the parable. And Jesus continues. Listen to this. To one of the servants he gave, and you may remember this, 5 bags of gold. To another he gave 2 bags of gold. And to another he gave 1 bag, each according to his ability. And then the master left to go on his journey. So he gives his wealth to these guys. One he gives 5, one he gives 2, and the other one he gives 1. So essentially, the master gets his guys together. He hands each of them a portion of his wealth, and he says, while I'm gone, I expect you to do with my wealth what I would do with my wealth. I want you to manage it the way you think I managed it. When I return, I don't know when, but when I return, you will have an opportunity to report how you did. Now, if you know this parable, you know what happens next. When eventually he comes back, when he returns, he discovers that they all didn't manage his money the same way, right? 2 of these 3 guys, they did really well. In fact, they doubled the master's money. One of them doesn't do quite so well, because what does he do? He buries it. And Jesus continues and says, after a long time, the master of those servants returned, and he settled accounts with them. And this is where the point of the parable becomes oh so clear. The servants didn't get to keep the money they had been managing. They didn't get to keep the money they've been managing. They didn't get to keep the extra money that they made on the master's money, did they? It all went back to who? The master. Why? Because 100% of it belonged to the master. And 0% belongs to who? The servants. They were what? They were managers. They were not the owners of the money. And when we read this parable, there's a tendency to get all caught up in the unfairness of it. I mean, one guy got 5, another guy got 2, one only had 1. In fact, some of you are kind of stuck right there in this unfairness. You look around the world, you look around your community, you look at your friends, and you think, it's just not fair. I work just as hard as he does. I work just as hard as she does. His salary twice as big as mine. I mean, if I had that much money, if I had that much opportunity, and so on. But Jesus says, no, that's not the point. The point of this parable is simply this. It's not the amount of money that each of these servants was asked to manage, was outside of their control. The issue wasn't how much they managed, it's what they did with what they were asked to manage. You getting the point? Think about this. If you sat down with your financial planner, or with a financial planner who's managing your money, and you asked to see where your financial planning and investment that you would invest in your money, and he or she says, well, you know, I'm not really organized, and I don't really keep records and track and details, but it seems to me, well, as soon as any financial planner says these words to you, it seems to me, it's time to find a new financial planner, isn't it? Because when you manage someone else's money, you are responsible and you are accountable. When you go to your financial planner or accountant, you want him or her to know exactly what it is. Responsible and accountable. So how about you? Do you feel responsible and accountable for how you are managing God's wealth? The wealth that He has entrusted to you? Or are you kind of the financial planner that God would have to fire? I mean, could you give an account of where your money is going, where it's gone, or is it just gone? If all of this seems a bit overwhelming, there should be no worries. We've got a couple more weeks to talk about what our money is going to say to us. And this week, we're going to do something super specific to help us focus on this principle of who is the owner. We're going to spy on our money together. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to spy on your money and you're going to spy on my money, but you've got to spy on your own money. Okay? We're all going to spy on our money, and we're not going to establish a budget. We're just going to keep track of where we're typically send it or spend it. And I'm sure most of you do that already. But if you don't, maybe it's a good idea to spy on your money. To see exactly what you spend. Even the rands and cents, because the rands and cents eventually add up, don't they? Now you may be thinking to yourself, perhaps you even leaned over and whispered to the person next to you, you know, there's an app for that. And I'm sure there is. In fact, there are several apps for that, I'm sure. And feel free to download one of those and use it this week if you want to. But you may be thinking something else. You may be thinking, if I don't know about this. I know where my money goes. I don't need to spy on it. I'm in control. Knowing you can know is not the same as knowing, isn't it? You really know. The fact that you have access to how much you've spent in different areas is different than sitting down and looking categorically at how much you've spent and where you've spent it. So this week, I want you to look. I want you to keep track. I want you to spy on your money, because when it comes to money, we should never find ourselves saying, well, it seems to me, or I'm not really sure, or I don't know. I mean, let's face it, a certain amount comes in, and then we spend it in places, right? A certain amount comes in, and then you and your husband or your wife, you decide where it goes. So when it comes to money, there should be no mystery. There is mystery when it comes to love and romance. There's mystery when it comes to your kids, and especially if you have teenage kids. There's a lot of mystery there, unsolved mystery. But when it comes to knowing your money, there should be no mystery. And this is true whether you earn a lot or little. And why are we doing this? Because where we spend our money is going to tell us where our heart is also. What does Jesus say? He says, do not put your treasures on earth, where what? Moth and rust destroy. But put your treasures in heaven, because that's where your heart is also. And so as we're moving through this series of what would our money say, we go to realize that if we listen to our money and if we listen to Jesus, it actually should say the same thing. Where is our attitude? Where is our heart? So try this. Try to keep track of where your money is going. And you will see whether you are the manager of it, or maybe the money is controlling you. And your heart maybe is not in the right place. Amen? Amen. All right, we're going to go into time of communion. So can I ask two elders to come and help me?